All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Gene. I'm going to do what I guess is going to be a very long testimony. So, sort of endurance marathon testimony. And this is going to be for everybody, basically all the victims who have been reported to have lost their lives since early 2017. And so, at the moment, I guess I did this in very basic Kazakh uh, a month ago, and that took me about 45 minutes. I'll do it now in English with a bit more, which I guess will result in a bit more detail and a bit more explanation, and this will also probably end up taking a bit longer. But yeah, basically, so when I did this about a month ago, it was, I think, 107 people, and that's what I'm essentially going to be testifying for today. Since then, I think that number has increased to 113 people who have lost their lives as part of this kind of mass incarceration campaign going on in Xinjiang over the past 3 years. I have not added the extra six to this list, so I basically will be, I guess, yeah, going through the same 107 as before. But just to note that, yeah, there's actually one, I think something like 113, 114 now, victims that we know about. So to start, the first person I'm going to talk about is Nurgazi Malik. He is a Kazakh, an imam. He was working in Urumqi. He was a very well-known imam, Communist Party member. He was the editor-in-chief of the Juma Waqz Dare, well, which translates as Friday Sermon magazine, which was a sort of kind of government promoted religious magazine for the people, kind of how to, teaching people how to properly interpret religion and how to properly do it in a way that doesn't conflict with whatever the party believes. And he was detained, and he is reported to have died in a camp in 2017, I believe, or 2018. But yeah, basically, his people who knew him actually and relatives held a burial for him here in Kazakhstan because I believe it was confirmed that he had lost his life. After that, we have what? This is going to become very annoying. After that, we have Abdusamat Davut, who is Uyghur. He is a well-known Uyghur Sheikh, and he had been imprisoned earlier for 10 years, from 1993 to 2003. He was detained again, I think in 2017, 2018, and he died reportedly in February of 2018 while in custody in Urumqi. Then we have the religious scholar Mohammed Saleh Hajim. He was also detained towards the end of 2017, and he was reported to have died in camp, also in Urumqi. Then we have Irbolat Abin. He's a Kazakh, 31 years of age, or he would be 31 years of age today, were he alive. He was 29 when he committed suicide. He's believed to have hanged himself in 2018 because he could not take the political pressure anymore. His mother was detained in a camp. She's now back in Kazakhstan. His brother-in-law, Tursunbek Kabi, was also briefly detained but under house arrest. He is also now back in Kazakhstan, but yeah, Erbalat took his own life. Then we have Mamunjan Rahman. This is Nejmuddin Rahman's father. Nejmuddin lives in the Netherlands now. He was a businessman from Kashgar, and according to Nejmuddin, he had been already detained in 2015, but and it was not clear if he had been released after that or if he just remained in detention. But in early 2019, Nejmuddin heard that he had died in a camp or in detention. Then there is Bekri Ibrahim. This is Omar Bekri's or Omar Bekali's father. He was reported by his son, who is now abroad, now in Europe, to have died in detention. He was allegedly taken away in April 2018. Then we have Yasinjan Tohti. This is Reyhan Gul Tohti's brother. He was a driver from Aksu city's Karatal township, father of 5, and he was detained. I mean, he was detained for the first time towards the end of 2016, held for 3 months, then released, then detained again, and then he is reported to have passed away in February 2018 from mistreatment in detention. Then we have Ayhan Mehmet, who is Dolkun Isa's mother. She was reported to have passed away while in detention, and Dolkun Isa got news of his mother's death in June 2018. Then we have Dolkun Isa's father, Isa Mehmet. He was more recently reported to have also passed away, and I don't know if we know very much about the circumstances of his death, but yeah. Then we have Qaysar Qayyum, who was the editor-in-chief of the literature translation magazine called Literary Translations, and he allegedly killed himself by jumping out of an 8th floor of his office building because he was afraid of being taken to camp. And this was in August 2017, so this is another suicide. Then we have Muttalib Nur Mehmet, who was he had lived in the US for some time. He got 2 master's degrees in the United States, one in business administration at California State University, one in information systems at Northeastern University. He returned to Xinjiang in 2014. He was forced to revoke his US citizenship as well. He was forced to revoke the citizenship of his 2 children who had been born in the US. He was allegedly taken to camp, I'm not sure in 2017 or 2018, but then at one point he was released. He was not in good health, and he supposedly died 9 days after his release from camp. And this is another thing that you notice quite a lot, maybe 10 or 20 cases right now that we know of people who died very shortly after being released. Zahirjan Ghopur. He was detained in 2013, actually sentenced to 8 years in 2014, and reportedly he died in prison on March 15th, 2018. Ehet Aman, if I'm not mistaken, he's the former principal of the No. 1 middle school in Aksu. He was allegedly detained, taken to camp in 2018, and died, I guess, while in detention towards the end of 2018 or early 2019, perhaps. So another case, Waris Abubakri. He was actually one of the former leaders of the 1988 Uyghur student movement. He was a writer, a film producer. He was arrested and put into camp in January 2019, according to what's been reported. Allegedly, he was released in November of last year, 2019, and supposedly after 1 week died of illness. So another case that's reported to have died shortly after being released from detention. And Gulbahar Tohti from Lop County in Khotan. She ran a shop at the village bazaar. Her husband was detained, and I guess she was left without a caretaker because her husband was taken to camp. And later she basically passed away. So she passed away without physically being detained, which also happens to some people. And I guess she was ill, and so that contributed to that. Nurala Khoshur. She was from Aksu City. She was arrested together with her husband and sent to prison, allegedly, and her body was returned to her family on January 2018, allegedly after she had died in detention. Aytursun Eli, she was a tour guide in Kashgar. She worked for the Hua'an tourist agency, where she was a deputy director. She was taken away, held in detention, and I believe according to her mother, she died, I think, after a week or two of detention, after just being taken away. So actually, 5 days after being detained. Abdul Hakim Mohammed Kurban, Abdul Hakim Mehmet Kurban, probably. He was a religious scholar. Religious figure. The religious leader of a local mosque. And he had spent time in prison before. I think, yeah. So he was detained on the accounts of separatism when he was only 29 in 1999. He was sentenced to 15 years to be served in a number 4 prison, presumably in Urumqi. Then he was released when he was 44. He was held in the house arrest until 2017. So that would be, on the house arrest for another 2 or 3 years. And then July 2017, he was detained again and basically sentenced to 10 years. And allegedly in June of last year, he passed away in prison. So this is a person who spent, I guess, almost half of his life in prisons and then lost his life there. Dawood Abdurrahman, this is Zumrat Dawood's father, whom she reported as having passed away, I guess, in October of 2019. And I think Chinese state media actually confirmed that he had passed away. Of course, they said, that it was just for natural reasons. We don't know, but yeah. Then there's a lot of people for whom I don't have photos, but yeah, I'll just kind of still read their names, descriptions, etc. So we have Juret Mahmoud. He was taken to camp and allegedly died there in 2017. Yep, this was in Ghulja. Mahmoud Emer, who we don't know much about, actually. We know his information. We don't know anything about him as a person, because this is something that came from government records that Adrian Zenz had obtained, and where it says that basically this is a person who is marked as a SLRY or a Sanlei Renyuan, or three kinds of people, which basically means that the type of people that you either take into custody, into prison, or into camp. And he's also marked as deceased. So putting those two together, it seems very possible that he had died in detention, although we can't confirm. So there's a few people like that. There's also Sadin Yasin, who also was marked as a three kinds of people, so a special kind of person that you detain, and also marked as dead. Then we have Zulfikar Ilham, who is he was 33 years old, university graduate. He worked for the Korla Land Administration Bureau for 3 years or 2 years. In 2018, he was fired, taken to a camp, and 1 year later, he was released and died, as I said, like some others, very soon after. Abdulhamid Abdullah, who I believe, was also a Damola. He was a religious scholar, over 78 years old, quite old. So he, let me see, I believe, yes, he is reported as having also having died in a camp in detention. Tohmir Dawood from Lop County. Again, this is somebody from government records. He was marked as a special person, a Toshu Renyuan, and marked as also dead, as deceased. Chushu. Another person like that, Gul Jamal Yusuf, also marked as a special person, marked as deceased. Same, Baimeh Hashim, marked as a special person, marked as also as deceased. Maimunhan Ahmed, these are from Lop County, I think. Well, mostly from either Kashgar or Khotan. This is from Lop County. Maimunhan Ahmed, deceased and marked as a special person. Nisa Demin, also from Lop County, Beshtohak Township, Yarkucha Village, also marked as a special person and marked as deceased. And then we have Rahman Jan Jalil, who was reported by Zumra Dawood. She said he was a doorman at a shopping mall in Urumqi, at the Subi shopping mall. He rented her father's house for 3 years. At one point, he was forcefully returned to his hometown, put in a concentration camp in Mikit County. And at one point, his sisters were called and then told that that their brother had died. The officials said that allegedly he had kidney failure, but yeah. So another person who died while in detention. Tohti Mehmet is, let's see, presumably from Aksu. detained in 2017, died in camp in May of 2018, allegedly. Razia Said Ahmed, 64 years old, from Rulja, imprisoned in Rulja in 2016, and allegedly she died during Korban Ait in 2019. Dilmurat Abliz, who is from Rulja city, he was not detained, his daughter was. It is claimed that the detention of his daughter contributed very negatively to his mental, psychological well-being, and that he died due to depression, and that he had been perfectly healthy before that. Metrozik Kerim, again, this is from government records, from Ilkuduk village of Beshtohak Township, Lop County, marked as a special person and marked as deceased. Abdulwali Abdurrahman, from Khorgas. This is another person who was reported to have died from psychological pressure, from depression, after seeing his relatives or his children detained. So his sons and one of his grandsons were detained, and after that he is reported to have passed away as a result of that. Buhelchem Mehmet. She was arrested in 2015, sentenced to 7 years, and her husband, who is Abdurrahim Imin in Turkey, or Abdurrahim Parach, heard recently, around the time of the New Year, that she had died in prison a year ago. Tomur Pasar, almost 80 years old, from Pichan County in Turpan. He is reported to have died in camp. Enver Ziaudun, also from Pichan. He is also reported to have died in camp. This is coming from Radio Free Asia reporting. Abdurrahim Abliz, also from Pichan, also in the same boat, so to speak, also reported to have died in camp. Ghalibjan Ahmedjan, also from Pichan in Turpan. He was allegedly beaten to death by a drunk police officer while at camp. Ren Cuifan, who is Han Chinese. She was living in Karamai and was a Church of the Almighty God member. So she was detained by the Chinese police, and I believe, less than 2 weeks later, died while in custody. Muhtar Abdullah, who is the older brother, I believe, of Nur Mehmet Abdullah in Germany, from Yarkand, and he is also reported to have been killed or died in camp. Hazim Qudus, from Kashgar. He was detained, transferred to prison in Urumqi, and allegedly he died there. This is reported by Radio Free Asia, confirmed by local officials. Idris Qudus, the brother of the victim just mentioned, similar story, also transferred to a prison in Urumqi and allegedly also died there. Shahmerdan Perhat, 38 years old, was from Urumqi, a businessman. He was taken to a camp at the end of March 2017, released in August 2019, and passed away about 10 days later. So another case of somebody who died shortly after being released. Qurban Rahman, a veterinarian in Kucha County, graduate of Xinjiang Agricultural University. He was taken to camp, and unclear when, and his body was returned to his family a year later, saying that he had died of the heroin overdose. I don't know. So yeah. Turunjan Obul Qasim, a doctor from Kashgar, founder of the Umit Hospital, disabled, could not really walk. He was taken to camp and his dead body was returned to his family, as I understand. Rahim Bergin Qutbai, a Kazakh who's actually outside of China, but this is another case of somebody who is alleged to have died from poor health, exacerbated by the psychological pain and the burden of having his relatives detained. In his case, it was all of his 3 sons who were detained, who are still detained, and I think are essentially believed to have been sentenced, given long prison terms. So he allegedly passed away here in Kazakhstan because of this of the psychological pressure. Alamjan Emet. This is another case reported by Radio Free Asia, who was allegedly a security guard in Irmudon township in Kashgar, and he was detained somewhere around May 2019 and allegedly died 40 days later. Osman Khame, a Kazakh who had his documents confiscated. Both him and his wife had their documents taken on September 2017, making it impossible for them to go to Kazakhstan to join their family and probably to get good health treatment. And he passed away while his documents were confiscated in the summer of last year on August 1st, 2019. Abdurrashid Tokhniyaz from Aksu. He was detained in 2016, sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, and he died after, I think, having served 1 year. Kakharjan Kabul. He was a professional driver from Aksu, taken to camp in July 2018, and allegedly died 4 months into his detention. Sulaiman Tohti, quite old, 85, 90 years old about. He was from Akhtu in Kızılsu, very well known, also a religious scholar. And he allegedly died in 2017 when he was detained and interrogated. So he allegedly died during the interrogation, or in that interrogation process. Yakup Rozi from Atosh allegedly died of a heart attack in a re-education camp in March 2019. Nur Mohamed Tohti, who is a writer, famous scholar, studied mathematics at Xinjiang University, Chinese Communist Party member, professional writer of the Xinjiang Writers Union. Chinese authorities confirmed that he had been put under some sort of residential surveillance. So they said, I think he was put in a specific place and kept under surveillance by the local public security officials or something like that. They didn't say that he was in a camp, but that's basically tantamount to detention. And after being released from this, it was found out that he had died at the end of May 2019. Omuruzak Makan, a Kazakh who is reported to have died in police custody after being sentenced towards the end of 2017. Yalkın Kurban was 37 years old, from Urumqi County, a farmer, owned a local hotel and a restaurant. He was taken to camp in December 2017. 10 months later, he was released, returned home, and died in a hospital about 10 days later. So another case of somebody who died shortly after being released from detention. Tursun Ablet, who committed suicide and hanged himself at home because he was because of the difficulties that he was facing, or I think either because of a threat that he was going to be taken to a camp, or because of the difficulty he was facing in a day camp that he was going to, I believe, or both. Nuri Mangul Mehmet, she worked in the transportation department of Hotan City. So I guess in the security organs, you could say. And then she was at one point sent back to her hometown in Bugur County in Bangkoling, taken to a camp, and then at one point she was reported to have died there. Kamergul Ablaz, who is reported to have died in a re-education camp in Kashgar. Reyhangul Mohammed, she was a teacher from Kelpin County in Aksu, and she is reported to have died in camp in February 2018. Then, actually, this one also has a photo. Teveko Rose, who is also reported to have died in camp in 2018. Rehemcan Tursun, from Tatran or Tarbahotai prefecture, detained around September, October 2017, and reported as having died in camp in May 2018. Gholam Mehmet, a businessman, reported to have died in camp in January 2018. Asa Rusul, a businessman from Kashgar city, reported to have died in camp in 2018. Habibhan Meruf, a businessman from Toksun County in Turpan, reported to have died in camp in February 2018. Tahir Majid was about 40 years old, philanthropist, a rich person. He died in camp reportedly in August 2018. Buzora Ablaz, a housewife, was 45 years old in Kashgar, reported to have died in camp in July 2018. Imam Abla, about 45 years old, a businessman. He was taken to camp in Kashgar city, and this one says March 2016, which seems a bit early, but okay. But he is reported to have died in camp in June 2017. Salama Tursun Kızı. She was her case is actually okay. Her case is slightly different. This is a Kazakh who had her documents taken when she went back to China. At one point, she was allowed to return to Kazakhstan, but then, according to somebody who knew her, she passed away here in Kazakhstan not long after returning, and it's believed that her experience in Xinjiang contributed to that to some extent. Bavdun Idris, this is Nejmuddin Rahman's uncle, who he reported as also having died in detention sometime between 2018 and 2019. Sagdullah Anarkhan, Kazakh, so her story is a bit crazy. So this was the case where you had Akıl Haziz, who was a local imam. He was taken to camp, then he was released later because of his health. He was treated. He was allowed to return home, but then they said that he would have to go back to camp again. And so, as it was reported by his relatives in Kazakhstan, his wife, Sagdullah Anarkhan, killed herself, so she committed suicide, to, I guess, in the hopes of preventing his having to go back to camp. I guess we don't know all the details, but basically her body was found by her husband, and then her husband was later charged by the state with murder, as having murdered his own wife. So that's a very crazy story. It's actually partially corroborated by the fact that there is an official record charging him with murder, and then you have this testimony from Kazakhstan that says that this is what actually happened. Abdullah Kare, he was a religious leader, and from Hami or Komol, and he supposedly, he's reported as having died in detention. Erkincan Abdul Karim, he was a primary school teacher in Kashgar, and this is another case, somebody who was released from camp and then died shortly after. Rahmatullah Shirbaqi, so this is actually the case. This is an infant, essentially. He was 2 years old, and he was found frozen in Khotan in an irrigation ditch, I guess. He had been in the care of his grandparents, and then he had fallen through ice. Both of his parents were allegedly detained. And so, yeah, he fell through ice. He died. And of course, yeah, that's had his parents not been detained, it's possible this would not have happened. Weli Mehmet, who is reported to have died in Atush in detention. Circumstances of his death are not clear, but he is believed to have passed away in December 2018. Jumakelde Ahay was 43 years old, Kazakh, and he was allegedly beaten to death by police. This was in Öming in Derbiljan County. He was allegedly beaten to death by police. Imam Hussein Mohammed, who is the brother of Hassan Jankari, who is another victim. And he was around 70 years old. He was retired. He had previously worked in the Health Inspection Committee. This is from Atush. He was taken to camp, I think, in 2017 and allegedly died in camp in November 2018. Kurman Kazakh, he was an imam, and he hanged himself in 2018, allegedly, because of the continuous pressure from the police in the interrogations. So this is another case of somebody who died just from the pressure, the psychological pressure that, you get living there. Rizalat Khadablit, Uyghur, from Turpan. She is said to have died 3 months after being detained in a re-education camp in 2018. Yasinjan Moydin was 44 years old, detained towards the end of 2016, and he is reported to have died in a re-education camp in November 2017. Merhaba Hamet, according to her relatives, she was heard to have died in prison. And apparently, according to reporting by Radio Free Asia, her death certificate was given to her family after her death. Barat Abubekri Tukhchi, he was released from camp in 2018 because of his health, and less than half a year later, he would pass away. Adalet Tiyip, who was 63 when she passed away. They went to Turkey in 2016, she and her husband, to see their son. After returning, she was detained and interrogated. Then, I think within a few months later, she was taken to a camp, and she's reported to have died in the camp. Rahmankul Kalimet was Kazakh, and he was an assistant imam, a graduate of the Xinjiang Islamic Institute, and He is said to, again, not have been detained, but to have died because of the local pressure he was facing from the authorities in the local security bureau. Also, both of his parents and his wife are in camp. Rasul Aziz, Abdullah Rasul's father, was 69 years old, from Toksun in Turpan. According to Abdullah, he was invited by local officials for tea, and according to Abdullah, he was poisoned and killed this way in February 2018. Ajakbar Toktarhan, Kazakh, he was not detained, but they went back to Kazakh. He and his wife went back to China. They had their documents taken, confiscated. They were forced to return the Kazakhstan green card to the visa service office in Urumqi, and he passed away while, in the state of having his documents confiscated in January 2018. Abdurrashid Saleh Hajim, who was a businessman and allegedly died 9 months after being detained at a camp. He had already been in bad health before that because he had been suffering from arthritis. Abdul Jabbar, he had been in camp. At one point, he was taken out and taken to a hospital in Ili. After about 6 months of detention, he was taken to a hospital in December 2017, but he passed away there while receiving treatment. Mursalim Muttalib Uyghur from Ili, reported to have died in the camp. Abdusalam Mehmet from Korla, this story was reported, I think, by Radio Free Asia. He had been a student at the Al Azhar Islamic University in Egypt. Then there was that whole period when the Chinese government, I think in 2017, the Chinese government was calling all the Uyghurs abroad to come back. There was an order in Egypt for hundreds of them to return. He was one of the ones who returned. And he was then reported to have died in Chinese police custody. Abdul Kirim Turan, Adam Turan's father. He was held in camp for a year, was released in a very, very poor condition, and passed away shortly after his release. So this is another case. He was around 80 years old, so already quite old. So, of course, there's the question. You could say that, well, then the death is not as surprising. At the same time, why would you detain an 80-year-old man? So, Yaqub Chan Naman, who is quite young. He was 17, from Kashgar, from Yopurkha County, and he was sent to a re-education camp in Kashgar and reported to have died in March 2018 in detention. Zelika Nurgazi, Kazakh, and this is another case of somebody who was reported to have died of psychological shock from having I think one of her daughters die. From learning of one of her daughter's deaths, and from learning that I think another one was detained in a camp, and so she passed away reportedly from the shock. Amina Kader from Aksu, reported to have died in a re-education camp, possibly because she had an untreated heart condition. Yep, in early 2018. Feyzullah Utuk. So this story is a bit special, I guess, in the sense this was somebody who was detained, but I think he managed to actually escape. And so there was a manhunt for him. There was a wanted poster for him that was photographed and posted online. And he was allegedly shot to death by police while on the run, so to speak, in April 2018. Abdouali Ablet, he allegedly died in prison or in detention. Not much else is known about him. So maybe, yeah, August 2018 that happened. Abdelkim Kerim, he was a teacher, detained in April 2017 and died 45 days after his detention, around then. Abdusattar Karahajim, he is reported to have, quote unquote, he was made a martyr by the Chinese, which we interpret as that he died, that he lost his life. He was already quite old, 80 years old, from Aksu. Tohti Muhammad, believed to have died under police custody. Abdurrashid Hajim, believed to have died in camp. Yasin Ibrahim, believed to have died in detention. This is a very, very short testimony, so not much to say. Died in detention. Mehmet Emin Yasin, also died in detention. Abdusami Obul from Tumshuk, reported to have died in detention, I think in 2018. Abdulahet Mehsum, an Islamic scholar, I imagine quite elderly. Yes, so yeah. This is somebody else who seems to have spent most of his life in prison. So he was arrested when he was fairly young, sentenced to 15 years of reform through labor. He finished that sentence in 1974. He went underground to continue teaching Islam. He was arrested again 5 years later in 1979. Released a year later. In 2001, he was arrested again, released after 2 months. 2004, he was arrested for the 4th time, served 5 years in prison, then spent the rest of his life under close, heavy surveillance, arrested again in November 2017 when he was 88, together with other family members, and died shortly after his arrest. Hamid Himit, he was a hydrologist at Xinjiang University. He was the director of a tourism department. I think he was a member of the Watarid project. That was a collaboration actually with a university in France, university in Iran, and Xinjiang University. And he was removed from the university and then was later reported deceased, and it's not clear exactly what the circumstances of his death were. And finally, Ahmed Janakh, who's Kazakh. He was an imam, and he is reported to have died in police custody in June, from what it seems, 2017. So that's it. That's my testimony for everybody that we've documented so far, which is over 100 people now who have, under different conditions, lost their lives over the past 2 or 3 years. So many died in detention. Many, as I said, died shortly after being released from detention, which also says something. And also a good number committed suicide. Well, not a good, but still, 5-6 cases out of 100 that committed suicide. And another maybe 5 or 6 that died simply from the psychological pressure from seeing their relatives detained. People who probably already were, advanced in the years, had other health issues, but all of which was, of course, exacerbated by having their, loved ones detained and just living in that reality that Xinjiang is today. So that's my testimony. It's a bit long, so if anybody watched this far, thank you. And yeah, all the best.